Meanwhile, some South African civil society groups have slammed Pretoria for hosting what they call a pro-Israel US Agoa Forum. The ANC-led government resolved last month to stand on the side of Palestine while Washington supports Israel. But to help us understand the view of civil society groups opposed to hosting Agoa Forum, we are now joined by Mametlwe Sebei, President of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa. Mr. Sebei, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, the 20th Agoa Summit took place and got off the ground today, and we know that there were some trade union and civil society forums taking place in terms of discussions. Was Giwusa a part of those discussions?
Not at all. We are opposed to any participation at Agoa, and I think we've made that clear to the entire labor movement. We believe that this summit is but another gathering to further the interest of U.S. and Western imperialism in tying African continent to its agenda, which at this point in time is very genocidal insofar as the carnage and the bloodbath of the Israeli regime in Gaza, which is funded, which is armed, which is equipped, which is cheered and urged by Western imperialism and U.S. imperialism first and foremost.
Now, you have penned as an organization a letter to SAFTU as well as COSATU requesting that they join your movement in the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign in light of the USA supporting Israel in the Gaza carnage, as well as then snubbing Agoa and hopefully rally behind you in the protests that you're planning to host. But SAFTU, in its response to the boycotting of the summit, has said that it's too late for them to leave their visitors in the lurch and would rather participate, and also urged that your organization participate as well. What was your response to that response?
Well, we never argued that there should be a boycott of the labor movement. Imperialism is a class that is the cooperations in the economy in this country, in the U.S. and across the world, and their institutions, including the state. Therefore, we don't include in that trade unions that have been invited by the trade unions in South Africa to constitute a parallel process in that respect. I do think that the answer addresses the wrong question. The issue here is that can we justify, in particular, legitimizing a gathering and a meeting with President of the U.S. Who is really guilty of war crimes insofar as we are concerned, because the U.S. imperialism and its government headed by Biden has been complicit in the war crimes committed by the Israeli regime against the people of Gaza. We are talking here about a situation where now approximately about 10,000 people are dead, and many more still, under a rubble. That is Gaza reduced by, relentless bombing and aerial bombardment by the Israeli regime and all of that. And we are saying that this is unacceptable, and we think that any suggestion that there are some benefits for that matter that can be justified in the interest of the working class, that is misguided, and I think that is absolutely wrong.
And of course, speaking of those benefits, in the letter that they penned back to you, they do state that Agoa benefits a lot of South African workers in an array of industries, and that as trade unions, it's your job to protect those workers in South Africa, especially for what Agoa stands for and what it provides. But instead, they called on Giwusa to join in on those discussions and really put your plight for the Palestinians within the discussions at Agoa.
You see, if you want to understand what Agoa is about, right, let's just read from what are the conditions of the U.S. in passing Agoa. It says, one of the conditions, the United States benefits from furthering its interest on the continent. Countries that undermine U.S. national security and foreign policy interests are not eligible for Agoa. Now, what are the interests of U.S. imperialism in this continent? Is a ruthless exploitation of the colonial labor which they have condemned the working class in this country and across the continent. Is about extraction of the minerals. Is about, of course, also, locating some of the industries in order to extract, a cheap migrant black labor, for that matter, that continue to be the mainstay, not only in the mining, but also industries that are dominated by the U.S. cooperation and those of their allies. And those are the corporations, by the way, that are the main beneficiaries of this Agoa. I mean, just take an example, right? 75% of the industries that, 75% of the benefits of Agoa in this country go to auto industry. Who owns auto industry? Is a U.S., is a German, is a Japanese multinationals, right? Who already have been subsidized to the tune of hundreds of billions by South African government. In addition to the fact that by this arrangement, South African government is now tied, as it is a condition of Agoa, to an American foreign policy interest in this country, but also across the continent, where we must say that there have been, the South African government has been also serving as a policeman of the interest of the Western imperialism insofar as the masses of Sub-Saharan Africa is concerned. On the question of Palestine, they are giving a lip service, right, to the cause of Palestinian masses. The fact that 29 years into their rule, we still have Israeli ambassador, that those soldiers from South Africa who are participating in Israeli war are not being prosecuted, despite the fact that no South African is allowed in law to participate in foreign conflicts without authorization in terms of, the relevant legislation and other things and so on. The fact that we have South African, or rather Zionist corporations being abetted by this government to take over key sectors of South African economy, it shows that ANC, by of course acceding to monopoly capitalism in this country, is completely and hopelessly tied to global capitalism and of course imperialist interests that dominate it. And this, first and foremost, are hegemonic U.S. and Western imperialism, and this is reflected by Agoa and his agenda in this country.
So with that agenda, what would you then cite as an alternative to Agoa in ensuring that the jobs of so many people within this country are secured?
We would have, for instance, if we were to take the auto industry, we have the auto industry that serves, the working class in this country, not in any way, right? It is entirely geared for a foreign market, the U.S., Europe, and so on and so on. In a situation where many working class people in this country desperately need public transport, would have it nationalized, brought under public ownership on the basis of democratic control and management of the working class to ensure that it is carried out to provide, is repurposed to provide environmentally sustainable but also cheap public transport in a form of buses, in a form of trams, in a form of trains that we so desperately need to ensure that we provide cheap and affordable transport for working class people who spend about 30% of their income on, transport because of the geopolitical or rather special planning of apartheid. That means many workers are still located very far away from their workplaces, from their schools, and areas of economic opportunities.
So Mr. Sebei, tomorrow you're holding pickets outside Agoa you're calling on the working class to come and support. What are your demands?
We are saying that, at the very minimum, right, South African government must press that the U.S. must support a ceasefire immediately. That two, they must break, in this case, with the U.S. foreign policy insofar as the Israeli and of course war in Gaza is concerned. Of course, there have been, rhetoric on that question, but it is very clear to us that the reason that they cannot expel Israeli ambassador, that they cannot carry out persecution of the Zionists in this country who participate in that war, in that carnage against the people of Gaza, the reason that they are allowing Zionist cooperations in this country and are not expropriating them as we have been demanding and imposing sanctions, boycotts on every cooperation that is complicit in the crimes and, of course, colonial project of the Israeli imperialism in Palestine. It is because of their ties to this Western imperialism and particularly to US. And we want them to begin, of course, to pull out of Agoa, but also to restructure economy in such a way that it untie the South African, economy from this neo-colonial dependence, and to ensure that we have an economy that is structured in the interest of the working class, not only by providing jobs that we desperately need, of course, including in the auto industry, but what we're also not even talking about is what was actually exchanged for a duty-free access to auto industry that is owned by the US. A part of the Agoa, by the way, is that, South Africa had to lower their tariffs on chicken imports and others. The poultry industry was sacrificed. Tens of thousands of workers were lost their jobs in that industry. That industry has been laid to waste because of Agoa. So we are saying that we cannot be doing business as usual, particularly with the U.S. imperialism at the time when they are complicit in crimes against humanity, at the time when they are responsible for funding and abetting a regime that is carrying out a genocide in Gaza.
All right, Mr. Mametlwe Sebei, thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Giwusa President Mametlwe Sebei speaking to us there about the boycotting of Agoa by the civil organizations and unions that are within the South African border.